No, damn it! Like, I really want to make a game video for Halloween, but everybody and their grandma have already talked about all these games. I just wish I had something to review that maybe was a little more obscure. Happy Halloween, everybody! It's the spookiest time of year once again, and horror is all around us. In movies, on TV, out on the streets, and in video games. In recent years, it's hard to deny that we're very much smack dab in the middle of an age of 80s homages. Remakes are everywhere, people keep trying to recapture their feel, and tons of stories are even set during that decade. And I mean, I get it, you know, like a lot of the creators that are active now grew up in the 80s, and honestly, popular culture parodying things from a few decades ago is nothing new if you actually take a moment to examine it. But it's not like the 80s is the only decade that had a horror identity all of its own. In the wake of the self-aware, relatively high-budgeted and more slickly directed slasher film Scream by the late Wes Craven in 1996, the face of teen horror in particular changed for a good while into the 2000s. All of a sudden, low budgets, synth scores, and summer camps made way for recognizable TV stars, contemporary hit music, and more everyday settings like high schools and colleges. And one of the very few horror games I've found that explore this is Obscure, created by Hydra Vision Entertainment and released for PlayStation 2, Xbox, and PC back in 2004. I distinctly remember playing this back when it was relatively new and actually having a lot of fun with it, but I don't remember any details. So with this being the month of spookiness and all, it seems the perfect time to revisit it. Does it hold up? Does it capture the feel of those 90s horror films? Well, there's only one way to find out. So with the PS2 startup screen already putting you in a good nostalgic mood, the game begins with a few lovely shots of a nice looking school. Set to the dulcet tone of Still Waiting by Sum 41, of course. Well, if the goal is to date the game to the early 2000s, we're off to an awesome start. The song is totally unfitting for these peaceful school shots, it ages the game horribly, and they even proudly brag about it on the box art like it's a freaking skateboard game. This has to be a joke about the way tons of horror movies at the time would constantly brag about containing anything even remotely contemporary just to get the teenage crowd watching. Which, the more I think about it, the more that sounds like a less gross version of luring kids into your van by promising candy.
Hey, kid! Wanna go see a horror movie?
Mom says I can't watch R-rated movies.
Don't worry about it, we're PG-13!
But aren't horror movies really dumb?
No, man, all your cool friends have already watched me. You wanna be cool like them, right?
I don't know.
We've got millennial punk rock!
Okay!
Anyway, the game begins with some after-school basketball practice, and we're quickly introduced to our cast. Kenny the jock, his girlfriend Shannon, Stan the skater kid, and Josh the nerd. You can tell Josh is the nerd because he has a camera, and he talks about making movies. Oh, and there's also Kenny's girlfriend Ashley, but she doesn't get a flashy introduction. Gee, I wonder what makes her so different. Anyway, Kenny stays behind to shoot some more baskets, but finds that his gym bag is missing. So, like the rational young man he is, he follows the thief into a creepy garden he never noticed the school had before, steps into an equally creepy shed, grabs the suspicious gun he finds in there, and goes further down a ladder into some even more creepy underground catacombs.
And why wouldn't he? This is definitely the appropriate response to a missing gym bag.
After some spooky exploring, he runs across a bald, terrified kid that claims a crazy person lured him there. And the two of them are quickly attacked by a gross monster and dragged off into the dark.
Oh my god, they killed Kenny! You bastard!
Okay, yeah, that joke is a cheap shot, but we have a Stan, a Kenny, and a Mr. Garrison in this game. It practically made the joke for me.
When Kenny doesn't show up the next day after not coming home at all last night, the rest of the gang decides to look for him after school. Well, except Stan. He's there to fix his test scores. Because he's obviously a rebel who don't need no school! But unfortunately, they soon find themselves locked in and surrounded by creepy creatures, forcing them to explore the entire campus to find Kenny and discover where the monsters came from. And that's Obscure's premise in a nutshell.
Now, you might have noticed that in almost all the game footage I've showed you so far, there have been 2 characters on screen. And that's because, surprise, surprise, this game is couch co-op.
That's right, at any time during the game, the second player can press start to join in on the adventure with a secondary character, and you can always switch characters by returning to wherever the gang has set up base at the time. It's pretty great.
And there's just no way in hell I'm reviewing a co-op game without giving you the co-op experience. So I had my friend Andy help record this. Say hello, Andy!
Hello there.
Look, man, beggars can't be choosers, okay?
As Andy and I started playing, we quickly found the game to actually have a lot of personality. It's a little awkward with its somewhat dated graphics and stilted voice acting, but it sets up a classic teen horror premise pretty well, all things considered. It also does a bunch of extra little things to make the game feel quote-unquote modern. You have to pick open the school lockers in order to find items, and you use things like CD-ROMs and energy drinks as save tokens and health refills, which is both a pretty funny and thematically fitting update to earlier survival horror elements, like, say, the typewriters in Resident Evil. The character profiles are also written like their school record, and they even make helpful doodles on the map a la Silent Hill to help you remember locked doors and puzzles.
It's all instantly familiar to any survival horror fan, of course, but it's just enough of a fresh coat of paint to fit the game's style and setting. Nice little touches like these go a long way, man.
Of course, once you start the game, it's a good idea to spend a few minutes experimenting a little to see how the co-op works. Basically, both players can control their characters independent of each other, though the camera will always follow player 1, which, is fair enough. Just try not to stray too far from each other. It's surprisingly easy for player 2 to get stuck behind things off screen they can't see. While the characters have individual inventories and can trade items and weapons with each other as they please, there are some items that are shared. Mainly any health items and ammo you find. This actually works to the game's advantage, since you can't just use either of them willy-nilly without risking your partner being left with nothing during a crisis. And since the game actually includes permanent death for its characters, a surprisingly rare concept in horror games even to this day, that means you really gotta plan ahead of eventual danger. You have to make sure there's always ammo available. You have to decide who solves puzzles while the other player covers their ass, and you have to prioritize who gets the strongest weapon available, and who needs healing the most after any violent encounter to keep as many people alive as possible. Just like you would have to if you were actually in this situation.
I honestly think this co-op mechanic is kind of genius, and it's one of the main reasons I wanted to play the game again. It forces player cooperation that goes well beyond you shoot these zombies, I shoot these zombies, and I can't think of many other third-person horror games that do that.
On top of that, each character also has an individual skill that helps you through the game based on their individual personalities. Kenny can sprint, Stan is faster at finding and picking locks, Ashley is the game's best fighter, Josh can check rooms for items, and Shannon can get the fuck out of my party.
Okay, to be completely fair, her real skill is to give story and puzzle hints, and she does heal a little more with items, so Andy and I used her through the whole game based on that. But it's honestly kind of useless.
Friedman's office is located in the west part of the school.
I know, Shannon. I marked it on the map.
Friedman's office is located in the west part of the school.
Yes, Shannon, I know.
Friedman's office is located in the west part of the school.
Shannon, I was in the room with you when he said it. 10 minutes ago. It's also the only other available location right now.
Friedman is in the building.
Shannon, I swear to God! Yeah, she basically just repeats blatantly obvious things that you can plainly see literally everywhere else at any point. Like I said, it's kind of useless. In fact, for as good an idea as the skills are, they're pretty much all completely useless in terms of gameplay. And that's a real shame since they're clearly there partly to make the characters feel less like totally expendable extra lives. Yeah, sure, Kenny can sprint, but that just leaves your slower partner off screen to get stuck behind shit again. Yeah, Stan is fast at picking locks, but it's usually best to clear a room of monsters first and then pick all the locks anyway, so that renders his ability kind of moot.
And while Ashley is supposedly the game's best fighter, that mostly means that she just has an extra slightly harder melee attack. In a game that gives you several tiers of guns.
Also, I can't for the life of me guess what on earth made the devs decide to make Ashley the tough girl. Wonder where that idea came from. Oh well, at least her attack does a decent amount of damage and she's dead. Oops.
Yeah, no joke, we actually kind of got her killed like 20 minutes in because the melee weapons can't compete with the guns and we didn't have a lot of healing items yet. And yes, I do realize that this makes our playthrough a painfully straight version of Black Girl Dies First, and I hate everything about that.
Well, at least we can pay our respect by mourning at the bloodstain where her corpse used to be. How delightfully morbid. Really, the only character whose ability is consistently useful is Josh. With just one press of a button, he will tell you if you found every item or interactable object in the room yet, making scouring the school for supplies and key items an absolute breeze. Without him, you'll constantly be mindlessly checking every nook and cranny for ammo and health items, and potentially be doing a lot of annoying backtracking.
So basically, here's my advice for playing this game. If Josh dies, reload immediately!
I know, the game's permadeath is one of its main selling points and you really should respect it, but Josh is damn near the only character worth using, so I'm not ashamed to say that Andy and I safe-scummed the ever-living hell out of it to keep him alive. Besides, for as much as the game tries to make the permadeath one of its main innovations, it's really not that important. All it does is change a few lines in the cutscenes depending on who player 1 is currently controlling, and it doesn't actually impact the plot much. It may have had the idea about a decade before games like Until Dawn came along, but it sure didn't have the means to actually make it matter.
And besides, the story is kind of a joke anyway, but we'll get back to that later. Because for all the faults I just pointed out about what is supposed to be one of the main selling points of the game, I actually do want to praise how it handles another survival horror game trope. The puzzles!
Look, I agree, Silent Hill and Resident Evil are great games, and their puzzles do a lot to add to the respective feel. They're classics, and I'd hate to be without them, that's for damn sure. But it's hard to argue that a lot of them come out of nowhere, and that they can be super annoying when they force you to dart all over the map to look for that one item that allows you to take one crack at solving that one riddle. And in the case of Silent Hill, some of them get so bizarre that it can take ages to even figure out how to start solving it.
It has been like 17 years since I first played the original Silent Hill, and I still get flashbacks of that goddamn piano. You can eat my dick with your pelicans and your doves and your broken keys!
In Obscure, however, puzzles are few and far between and only very rarely require finding strange artifacts or solving an actual riddle, and when they do, those are always closely related to the mysterious villain of the game, rather than existing just to open a random door or progressing to another building. Instead, most obstacles are actually solved using totally mundane solutions that video game logic normally leaves unavailable. Not only can you open locked doors by just breaking windows like a thug, but puzzles often boil down to things like fix the shelf mechanism or remember to lock the safety hatch on an elevator before you go down.
I love this. Not because I dislike cryptic puzzles or anything, mind, but just because it makes it feel that much more believable that a group of random high school students would get as far as they do in this scenario.
The best example has to be the rusted chain lock on a particular door in the classroom building. Do you run off to find the right key? No. Do you solve a riddle? No. Do you find some intricate way around it? Nuh-uh. You literally just go right downstairs to the chemistry classroom, grab some acid, and melt the fucker. I mean, yeah, it's definitely Hollywood acid, but it's way more believable than, I don't know, finding a statue of some obscure biblical figure inside an old grandfather clock in a hidden office or something like you'd see in other games. And this sort of mundane simplicity even translates to combat. You quickly find out that the various creatures you meet are weak to light, so not only do you almost instantly duct tape flashlights to your guns, which, yeah, I realize is total nonsense, but it's part of the game's campy charm in a way, but now and then you can actually clear out whole rooms of monsters by just smashing the windows to let light inside and incinerate them, rather than waste ammo or health fighting. I genuinely think this is kind of brilliant.
Well, except this one part in the cafeteria.
See, as you progress through the school, you eventually get to the cafeteria, where the power has been cut and you can't open the windows. So you have to make your way through this place that is crawling with monsters to get a fuse, head back to the first room, insert the fuse, and then fix the wires to finally turn on the lights and kill everything in that building, while the other player keeps the monsters at bay.
That would actually be a pretty fine and super tense way to go about it. If it didn't block half the fucking screen!
Look at this shit! A huge-ass panel appears, covers almost everything, and forces you to play a Connect the Lines game, while unending hordes of monsters come at you until it's solved. It's intrusive as hell, and it almost guarantees a character death if you haven't been conserving ammo or know ahead of time that this is what you gotta do. What's wrong with just the loading bar you use when you pick locks? At least that way the other player trying to protect you can see what the hell they're doing! Another building worth mentioning is the dormitory. The dormitory fucking sucks! Okay, actually that's not entirely fair. At first, I thought this was one of the more genuinely scary parts of the game. It's all run down, there's a seriously oppressive atmosphere in there, and at this point of the game you're likely running low on ammo and running into stronger monsters, so you're constantly a bit on edge.
But then you get to the second floor.
Be careful. The floor seems weak.
Everything about this fucking blows!
You have to be so goddamn precise at this part. Taking one wrong step sends your character falling to a cheap instant death, and the dangerous spots are randomized, so you can't even memorize anything for a second attempt. The fixed camera makes it a hassle to deal with, and you get instantly punished by death if you step 1 inch in the wrong direction. And you have to do it twice since you gotta go back after investigating a few rooms, with new danger tiles, and the fixed camera not adjusted to accommodate for going the other way.
It is a cheap-ass hindrance that only exists to guarantee at least one character death if you've been playing too well, and it can absolutely go fuck itself. But now that I've covered some of the game's more bullshit moments, it might be time to finally talk about the story. So, spoiler alert, I guess.
As I said earlier, the story is not exactly great, but it is perfectly serviceable all the same. Basically, as you explore the school, you find out that the principal, Herbert Friedman, was actually born in the 1800s and went to Africa with his brother Leonard to research a plant called the mortiphilia, in the hopes of transferring its regenerative effects when exposed to sunlight to humans. Naturally, this didn't earn them any favors with the scientific community of the time, and Leonard injected himself to prove the plant's potency, and ended up having a horrible mutation triggered by the sunlight. So, in an attempt to cure his brother, Herbert, wonder where they got that name from, exposed himself to the spores to become immortal in exchange for having to avoid sunlight. He then locked Leonard's mutated form underground and built a school around their estate and started using kidnapped students as test subjects. Shortly after this revelation, the gang is subjected to the spores as well and will horribly mutate and die by the time the sun rises. And so, they had to stop Herbert and find a cure before then. And that's it.
So it's a school faculty conspiracy that turns people into grotesque monsters. Yeah, this is basically the best video game adaptation of The Faculty you're ever gonna play. And, in turn, The Faculty is the best film adaptation of The Thing High School AU fanfiction you're ever gonna see, so there you go.
The dev team do openly admit this though, and they even base Stan off of Josh Hartnett's character from that film, so I can't say I mind.
So, to recap a bit thus far, Obscure is a somewhat clunky but perfectly decent horror game with a lot of personality. Now that's fine and all, but it does have one little problem. It's not scary. Like, at all.
Obscure relies entirely on the fact that gross-looking monsters roam the school and that your characters can die in order to scare you, and it just doesn't work. Scares only really come from the surprise of being attacked and trying to keep each other alive, and from there it just throws monster encounter after monster encounter at you rather than build any actual spooky atmosphere. This game is also one of those games that confuse difficulty with more enemies, less ammo. In a last-ditch attempt at scaring you, the entire last stretch of the game has you running through identical-looking maze-like gardens and halls, as well as dodging giant-ass mutants that you don't have enough ammo to deal with unless you've gone item hunting with Josh. And even then you might be struggling. And it just becomes an annoying chore to get through rather than the lead-up to an intense climax.
And when you finally actually face the mutated Leonard, he's an absolute fucking load!
As the game's only true boss fight, it completely fails at being intimidating and, once again, mostly feels like a chore. You have to run around him and shoot at these tentacles to eventually wear him down, but not only do these weird energy pillows pop up at random and knock you on your ass, sometimes just to be hit by another one while you're trying to get up, he has a fucking instant death attack that you can only dodge by running to a glowing circle in time. And you better be smack dab in the middle of it or you're fucked. Yada yada, you finally beat up Big Bad Leonard, he comes back for one last scare, but the sunlight kills him and whoever your survivors are manage to inject themselves with the antidote and live to see another day. And that's the end of Obscure.
You do get a few bonuses for completing the game, but I honestly think they're kinda underwhelming.
And making of documentary sounds interesting, until you realize it's literally just a montage of the crew working on the game with no actual interviews or insights. It does also have a sort of new game plus you can play that replaces some weapons with more comical or powerful ones, depending on what difficulty you beat the game at first. And the characters that survived get some new outfits in that game mode, ranging from the sensible to the holy fuck Shannon what happened to you.
And up next to the catwalk, our lovely Shannon Matthews is showing off the Daddy Didn't Give Me Enough Hugs set. Oh, what a rebellious little darling she makes. Let's give her a hand, everybody. Yes, she's lovely, I know.
So, in conclusion, what can I really say about this one? Well, it's kind of like a bag of sweet and sour candies, where thankfully about 65% of them are the sweet kind.
Granted, as a horror game, this falls flat on its face. It's about as scary as picking out a pair of socks for the day. And while it has a fair bit of personality in its attempts to humorously ape the hip and trendy era of teen horror movies, it tends to boil down to stilted voice acting and some totally radical speech here and there. It has all the right ideas and an identity all of its own, but it never gets those ideas totally right and doesn't quite become what it's trying to be. What it is, however, is a unique co-op survival horror game with a major focus on having each other's backs and playing ahead. All the best moments come from your conflicts and cooperation with the other player, and I'm honestly baffled that very few major horror games have tried to do something similar to this. It really turns a substandard horror story into a really fun gaming experience. And I think that's what helped Obscure build a small but well-deserved cult following over time. It did do well enough to get a sequel in 2007, although the supposed third game eventually got retooled into an unrelated game called Final Exam, which seems to embrace the silliness of the premise a bit more. So, Obscure's legacy was short-lived in a way.
Still, I've never played anything quite like it, and I had a lot of fun playing it again. So you really shouldn't feel discouraged from taking a crack at it with a friend sometime. After all, what is Halloween but a time to enjoy some spooky fun with your friends? In fact, I think I'm gonna go do that right now. Happy Halloween, everybody! Try not to choke on that candy.
Happy Halloween, folks, and thanks for watching me ramble about obscure stuff like, well, obscure. Oh, don't look at me like that joke still works. Don't forget to press the like button and leave a comment below. Maybe about some of your other favorite horror games that just don't get enough attention. As usual, I want to say a special thanks to John Algetz, Keith McRae, Warren Miller, Andreas Strauss, as well as my other patrons for their support. You guys rock. And if you're sitting there thinking you want to support me as well, you can do so by donating via Patreon, which in turn will gain you access to my work in progress feed, where you can also be the first to see some of my other projects as they're being worked on. The link is right there in the description below. And of course, if you're new to my channel, don't forget to hit subscribe as well as the little bell to be notified as soon as I make more videos. And believe me, there's plenty more coming. Thanks for watching, everybody, and bye-bye!